It started with a Jeep. Not a scream, not a witness, not a 911 call. Just a vehicle that didn't belong. A shop owner in St. Petersburg, Florida, noticed it parked nearby. At first glance, nothing unusual. But then, he looked closer. There was blood. A purse sitting in plain view. Money untouched. Identification still inside. The seatbelt hanging out of the door like someone left in a hurry, or was forced out. And that's when instinct kicked in. This wasn't an abandoned car. This was a crime scene. Police were called, but before they could even process what they were seeing, another call came in. Just half a mile away, neighbors reported something unthinkable. 2 bodies lying in the road. They were identified as Richard and Carla Van Duzen. Richard lay face down in the dirt. Carla on her side. Both had been shot in the head. But Carla's story was even more horrifying. Because she didn't just die, she suffered. Before they became victims, they were people. Richard Van Duzen, a hard-working sales manager, a man with a passion for antique cars. He didn't just collect cars, he restored them, brought them back to life. Carla Van Duzen, a courtroom reporter, precise, focused. But outside of work, she had a completely different side. On weekends, Carla dressed as a clown, entertaining sick children in hospitals, bringing laughter where it was needed most. Together, they were known, respected, loved. They had been married for 3 years, each bringing children from previous marriages, building a life, blending families, creating something new. They lived near a quiet beach town, beautiful, safe. The kind of place where something like this wasn't supposed to happen. But it did. 2 crime scenes. 1 brutal story. Investigators began piecing together the final moments of Richard and Carla's lives. There was likely a third person in the vehicle. Someone they knew. Someone they trusted enough to let into their space. Richard was forced out of the Jeep, at gunpoint. Moments later, he was executed. Carla remained inside, alive, aware, terrified. She turned toward the shooter, raised her hand, a natural instinct to protect herself. The bullet tore through the windshield, through her hand, into her head. But it didn't end there. The killer caught her seatbelt, dragged her body out, dumped it beside Richard, then drove away, in their Jeep, and abandoned it. Blood in vehicle, purse untouched, bullet inside Jeep. No fingerprints. It was controlled, deliberate, personal. Then came the first break. A driver's license, found near the abandoned Jeep. The name? Henry Sullivan. Police tracked him down. Outside his apartment, they found something shocking. A classic 1971 Chevrolet Cheyenne pickup truck. It belonged to the victims. Now the question was simple. Why did he have it? Sullivan denied everything. Calm, unbothered. Sullivan, reenactment. I lose my IDs all the time. It sounded ridiculous, but it wasn't impossible. Forensic examination. A 9mm bullet and a 9mm gun found in his home. Everything pointed to him. Until it didn't. Ballistics testing revealed the gun was not the murder weapon. And just like that, the case cracked open again. Then, another man walked into the story. William DeParvine. He claimed the truck was his, said he bought it from the Van Duzens just one day before their deaths. At first, he seemed cooperative, almost too cooperative. But then, the lies started to show. Contradictions. Claimed payment, $6,500. Actual expected price, $13,500. Timeline didn't match. Victim phone call contradicted him. The call that changed everything. Carla called her mother at 6:37 p.m. She said she was driving behind her husband and the man who bought the truck. That meant one thing. The buyer was still with Richard, and DeParvine was lying. Two suspects, one with evidence linking him but no weapon match, the other with a story that didn't hold up. Both had criminal pasts, both had opportunity, but only one was the killer. And the truth was darker than anyone expected.
Investigators weren't just looking at suspects. They were looking at contradictions. Two men, two criminal histories, two very different stories. But only one story kept falling apart. William DeParvine. At first, he was confident, relaxed, even helpful. But detectives had something he didn't expect. Time. And time exposes lies. Investigators re-examined the timeline. 5:30 p.m., DeParvine claims the couple left. 6:37 p.m., Carla calls her mother. That gap was everything. Because Carla didn't just call. She described exactly what was happening. She said she was following her husband and the man who bought the truck, which meant DeParvine was with them long after he said he wasn't. And now, investigators knew he wasn't just lying, he was hiding something. Detectives brought DeParvine back in. This time, they weren't asking questions, they were confronting him. You said you left at 5:30, but Carla called at 6:37. For the first time, DeParvine hesitated, and that hesitation was the crack. Piece by piece, his story began to shift. He admitted he had been with them longer, but still denied involvement in the murders. But investigators weren't done, because now they had motive. William DeParvine wasn't just a buyer. He was a man with a past, recently released from prison, on probation, desperate for money. And then he saw it. The truck. A fully restored classic 1971 Chevrolet Cheyenne. Rare, valuable, and worth far more than $6,500. That truck was never just a purchase. It was a target. Investigators' theory. DeParvine lured the couple with the promise of a sale. Then he tried to take the truck for less, but something went wrong. An argument, resistance, and then violence. Investigators believe this is how it unfolded. DeParvine meets the Van Duzens, gains their trust. They agree to finalize paperwork that evening. Richard drives the truck. DeParvine rides with him. Carla follows behind in the Jeep. At some point, they stop. That's when everything changes. DeParvine pulls out a gun. Richard is forced out of the vehicle. Moments later, he's shot. Carla sees everything. She's still in the Jeep, terrified, frozen. She turns, raises her hand. The shot is fired. The bullet tears through the windshield, through her hand, into her head. But the violence doesn't stop. DeParvine cuts her seatbelt, drags her body out, leaves both victims behind. Then he takes the truck and attempts to make it look like a legitimate sale. But he missed something. The timeline and the truth. With inconsistencies mounting, investigators moved in. DeParvine was arrested,
charged with the murders of Richard and Carla Van Duzen. The case went to trial. Prosecutors laid out the timeline, the lies, the motive. There was no single piece of evidence, but together they told one undeniable story. The jury deliberated. Hours passed. Then they returned. Guilty. William de Parveen was convicted of the brutal murders of Richard and Carla Van Duzen. Justice had finally caught up. In the end, it wasn't the blood in the Jeep, or the abandoned vehicle, or even the bullet that solved the case. It was a lie, a small crack in a carefully crafted story, and once that crack appeared, everything collapsed. Richard and Carla were more than victims. They were parents, friends, members of a community that will never forget them. And their story is a reminder that sometimes the truth isn't hidden, it's just waiting for the right question. Please like, subscribe, and comment.